What it do, babe? Y'all know who it is. It's your boy, O to the D. On this premiere, man, it's gonna be part one, and this is gonna be the directors of a movie called A Noble Lie. I got the movie, but I ain't gonna play it because I probably get copyright struck. So you can go look it up yourself. But it talks about the Oklahoma City bombing, and I added it up with other stuff that I found. And like I said, it's a two-part series. The second part will be coming later. But sit back and pay attention. And this is like one of the ones, when they did what they did in Oklahoma City bombing, they was trying to do what they did at 9/11, but they didn't kill enough people. Let's go ahead and run the footage. To be a Jew too, only if you're in the bloodline.
Here's now what we are starting to learn about the succession, or what someone obviously hoped would be a succession of explosions. The first bomb that was in the federal building did go off. It did the damage that you see right there. The second explosive was found and diffused. The third explosive that was found, and they are working on right now as we speak, I understand, both the second and third explosives, if you can imagine this, were larger than the first. So try to imagine two- or threefold happening what we've already seen there. It is just incredible to think that there was that much heavy artillery that was somehow moved into the downtown Oklahoma City Federal Building. Two other explosive devices were found and were not detonated, and they were larger than the first. I think he said another bomb.
But they will tell you it was only one bomb that created everything at Oklahoma City. So where these other bombs come from?
If you were watching there was a white pickup truck backing a trailer into the scene here. They're trying to move people out of the way so they can get it in. Appears to be the Oklahoma County Bomb Squad. It's their bomb disposal unit, essentially, is what it is, and it is what they would use to, if the report that we gave you just a few moments ago turns out to be correct, that they have found a second explosive device of some kind inside this building. They'll back that trailer down there, and the bomb squad folks will go in, and they will use that trailer. You see the bucket on the back there, sort of, this is how they would transport the explosive device away from this populated area to try to do something with it.
The Justice Department is reporting that a second explosive device has been found in the A.P. Murrah building in downtown Oklahoma City. Mike, you're still with us, aren't you?
Yes, I am, and I might tell you in addition to that, in fact what we were told at the scene a few minutes ago was that in fact two different explosive devices were found in addition to the one that went off.
So a total of three.
A total of three.
Now confirmed through federal authorities that a second bomb has been found inside that federal building in Oklahoma City. It was an explosion at 9 o'clock this morning that did that damage you're looking at right there, blowing off the entire north face of that building. Again, you're looking at the north face there. A second bomb was found on the east side of that building. A bomb squad is on the scene. That second bomb has not exploded. We don't know quite the status yet if they've managed to defuse it, but it has been confirmed that a second bomb was found on the east side.
What I have is that one device was deactivated. Apparently there's another device, and obviously whatever did the damage to the Murrah building was a tremendous, very sophisticated explosive device.
So President Clinton just called Governor Frank Keating, and he says that 3 FBI anti-terrorist teams are en route to Oklahoma City. Right now, they are saying that this is the work of a sophisticated group. This is a very sophisticated device, and it has to have been done by an explosives expert. Obviously, with this type of explosive.
Got out. And how did John Doe number 2 get away from the Murrah building?
My understanding is there was a video of McVeigh getting out of the Ryder truck, jumping into this other pickup with John Doe number 2. Well, where's that video? Are we ever going to get to see it?
Do you realize what you've just seen, America? The government had multiple surveillance camera tapes. In fact, when it finally came out in court, when the federal government declared in 2001 that they wouldn't release the videotapes because of national security implications, that there were actually 12 surveillance camera tapes that had these different Islamic individuals, these Arabic men with McVeigh and others, as well as the BATF hiding out right down the street, preparing to pounce on the operation and declare themselves the heroes, the saviors, the victims. Think about it. Now in 2001 and right into 2002, the federal government claims national security and refuses to release 12-plus surveillance camera tapes. What are they hiding? And the feds never tried to use it in court. I mean, if they had McVeigh pulling up alone and bombing the building and it was just a truck bomb, why not use the actual surveillance camera tapes to do it? But they didn't do that. You have to ask yourselves why. What's on that tape? Well, after you've seen all this evidence, it's clear. Federal involvement. Ratcheting up the police state right here in America. Danny Coulson, the FBI's top counterterrorism agent, checked into an Oklahoma City hotel nearly 9 hours before a truck bomb nearly leveled the Alfred P. Murrow Federal Building. The Embassy Suites Hotel receipt of Danny Coulson, the director of the FBI's Terrorist Task Force and founding commander of the Bureau's hostage rescue team, was dated April 19, 1995, with a check-in time of 0:20. That's military time for 12:20 a.m. Almost 9 hours before the blast, Chief Agent Coulson lied to the American people. He told a Time magazine reporter in 1999 the harrowing tale of how he sped at over 100 miles an hour from his home in Dallas, trying to get there after the bombing to save people and conduct an investigation. Oh, and by the way, the FBI won't release any of the credit card statements and records for any of their agents. What are they trying to hide?
The system wasn't working. Going through the system didn't work. I did everything that they advised me to do. And it didn't do any good.
Hoppy Heidelberg was an upstanding member of the community with no criminal record. He'd been a grand juror for years, but when he started asking questions about the Middle Eastern connection and FBI prior knowledge and BATF involvement, the FBI actually came to his house brandishing firearms and told him to shut his mouth if he knew what was good for him. When he refused to be part of the cover-up and demanded that he be able to call witnesses as his right as a grand juror, the judge kicked him off the case. Just one more piece of this massive cover-up.
The news channel has learned of another strange development. Apparently, before the bombing, Governor Frank Keating's brother, Mark, had been working on a novel about a terrorist bombing in Oklahoma City. Stranger still, one of the characters in the novel was named Thomas McVeigh.
Governor Frank Keating's brother, Martin Keating, wrote The Final Jihad. In the book, Tom McVeigh masterminds the bombing of the Oklahoma City building. He dedicated the book to the Knights of the Secret Circle, a known Illuminati group. And he wrote the book 2 years before the bombing. The tragic events of Oklahoma City, if the truth was known to the public, makes it even more tragic, even more horrific. You see, it's now a monument to the police state, a monument to the sacrifice the government made of American lives, of American blood, of American tears, as an excuse to get the feds to be able to circle the wagons against the American people, to have a pretext, an excuse to expand their police state. They covered the whole operation up. It's clear that they had prior knowledge that multiple bombs were detonated on the inside of the building, that the feds have grabbed the 12 surveillance camera tapes and are refusing to release them, even in 2002. Threatening grand jurors, destroying the building and burying it under guard. The federal government blamed this tragic event on Christians, conservatives, gun owners. But if you look at the evidence, it's clear who's behind it. The federal government. And they use this just like Hitler used the Reichstag to get martial law cranking in America.
$62 million is coming to Oklahoma soon to help anti-terrorism and disaster relief efforts.
Government crime certainly does pay, especially when it's government-sponsored terrorism against its own institutions. That's right, the BATF locally got tens of millions of dollars extra funding, but so did every other federal agency that tries to control the American people. $24 billion increase in anti-terrorism funds. And after September 11th, they've now tripled that. And of course, the BATF ensured that the building was completely demolished, so there couldn't be any evidence of their heinous acts. And that's right, ladies and gentlemen, they actually buried the building under guard at a private landfill with Wackenhut guards protecting it. From A to Z, federal fingerprints all over it and doing everything they can to suppress the truth. For Bill Clinton, the servant of the New World Order, whose approval rating exploded after the attack. And his attack dog, the butcher of Waco, Reno, she was very happy to blame it on Christians and conservatives and gun owners. It was her excuse to expand federal control over local police and to merge the military with the police in new giant anti-terrorism training camps where the military and the police prepare for mass gun confiscation and extermination of the American people. Evidence of that's coming up later.
You know, we've also been told that by two different witnesses, we have been told that the bomb squad was in front of the federal courthouse, that building, that morning at 7:30, and that they had already cleared the Murrah building. So there was something strange and unusual going on that morning because we got a bomb squad down there clearing buildings before 7:30 in the morning, and then we have this rumor, which I subsequently confirmed, and I spoke with the gentleman regarding what the ATF agent said. That's not just a rumor. I've spoken with the man, and that did happen.
Is there a Middle Eastern connection that is not being pursued by federal investigators? The very existence of John Doe II has been denied despite eyewitness accounts of his presence in Kansas and in Oklahoma City on the day of the bombing with Timothy McVeigh in the Ryder truck.
From the very beginning, we have what probably is the most massive manhunt in our nation's history for John Doe number 2. And that lasts for a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden the FBI comes back and says, there was not really a John Doe number 2. That it was Mr. Bunning came into Elliott's shop maybe 24 hours after McVeigh rented the truck, and that everybody's just confused. Well, if everybody's just confused, we've got a lot of confused people. We not only have Mr. Elliott, who still maintains privately to his friends that there was a John Doe number 2, and that there was not only one more person with McVeigh when he rented the truck that day, but there probably was 2. And that it wasn't 24 hours later, it wasn't 24 hours before, it was the morning that McVeigh rented the truck. And Mr. Elliott's not going public. He won't talk to anyone in the press, but this is what he's telling his friends, that it doesn't matter what the FBI says, there was a John Doe number 2 there. Now we have, in Oklahoma City, we have McVeigh stopping at a tire shop at 10th and Hudson the morning of the bombing, about 20 minutes till 9, getting out of the Ryder truck, walking over to a young man and asking him for directions to 5th and Harvey. The young man tells him the directions, and then McVeigh gets back in the Ryder truck. I've talked with this young man as recently as this morning, and he tells me he's standing no more than 8 feet from the truck, and he sees John Doe number 2 sitting in the passenger side of the Ryder truck at 20 minutes till 9, and he sees McVeigh sitting there in the truck who he just spoke with. He indicates to me that this John Doe number 2 could possibly be a Middle Eastern looking top man with a baseball cap on. And this is what he told the FBI immediately after the bombing.
The morning of April 19th, I was working at Johnny's Tire Store. At about approximately 8:25, a Ryder truck pulled up into my place of business. At that time, a gentleman asked me for directions to 5th and Harvey. I proceeded to explain the location of where he was asking me. He seemed to be a little concerned of where I was telling him about. At that time, the gentleman, Timothy McVeigh, stepped out of the truck. I walked him over to, let's say, 10, 11 feet away from the truck itself. I pointed a direction downtown, which is to my right. He seemed to acknowledge where I was talking about. At that time, the gentleman walked back to the truck. I talked to him. I also noticed there was a passenger in the truck at that time. From that point in time, the Ryder's truck seemed to stay there about another 5 minutes and headed the direction I explained where it was at.
What the person in the truck looked like?
The person in the truck looked to more be of a Caucasian, Middle Eastern, was not an African American, he was not a real light complected, he was not blonde hair, light skinned. He, at that time, like I said, they didn't stay very much longer. I didn't
wearing a cap?
Yes, also, he was wearing a ball cap. Timothy McVeigh had his on backwards, which is just like this. It was on his head. The other gentleman had his on like this. They really didn't acknowledge me so much. They didn't really seem that they were that concerned. They didn't seem nervous. They seemed to be more lost. They came in from the west. They pulled into our business, kind of a catty corner angle. From there, they proceeded right to go south downtown area.
How far is Johnny's Tire Company from the Merle building?
I'm located on 10th and Hudson. The bombing took place on 5th and Harvey. That would seem 1 block over, 5 blocks down. I'm to the north side of the bombing. 4 days after the bombing, or 3 days after the bombing, the government took me downtown to identify the gentleman. Under what I can understand, I did identify the gentleman as being Timothy McVeigh.
Did they have the
I remember the day this happened, man.
passenger, which was with McVeigh, was he in a line also?
No, he was not. At that time, I've never even actually seen, at that time, before the John Doe actually 2 number come out, I'd never even seen a photo, a sketch, nothing like that. And also, when I did identify Timothy McVeigh, I had not even seen him. The only way I'd ever seen him was through a sketch on a paper at Daily Oklahoma.
What's your motivation for telling the American people what you have right now? Are you in this for money?
I'm not in this for anything but to let people know that this is what I seen. I feel at this point in time that I will, or should I say I might be a witness in the bombing itself, but as far as me actually being motivated for any other reason, I have none. I just want to let people understand this is what I seen that day. You know, and then that changed my mind whether I testify or not. This is what I seen that day.
Oklahomans have been affected by this terrible tragedy. 169 people lost their lives. We feel compelled to bring this information to the American people.
This is a perfect example of a very credible witness. He was extremely reluctant to even sit down and give me an interview for a book. At the time that I contacted him, he did not realize that I knew what he already knew, or that I had an inkling about what he knew. This individual had gone outside of the building to smoke his pipe at approximately, let's say 15 or 20 minutes until 9 o'clock that morning. He was working in a building, the Journal Record building, which is directly north of the Mirror building, less than 100 yards from the front door, from the door of the Mirror building. As he's out there, he notices a yellow Mercury parked up against what they call the Athenian building, and it is it's facing him off slightly to his right, with one individual in the vehicle. That only reason that he remembers that is that you don't park there. The parking is spread out in front of him. That's where you're supposed to park in the authorized spaces, and this car's illegally parked. He then remembers it's Wednesday, it's laundry day, he's a blue-collar guy, he's a pressman. He's supposed to turn his dirty uniforms in from last week for clean uniforms on Wednesday. So he takes off to the west down an alley and goes around the corner to his pickup truck, gets his laundry, and is on his way back to the area where he was smoking his pipe. And at that moment, he looks up and sees the yellow Mercury, and now there are 2 men in it, and it is racing towards him. When it gets within just a few feet of him, it makes a sharp swerve turn to the right, and it jumps a couple of curb guards. And at that time, as it's swerving in front of him, he sees the man that he later identifies as Timothy McVeigh, and the olive-complected Middle Eastern man.
TBN
Funny broadcast.
had come up to me and asked me if I knew anything about the bombing or if I had been down there, and I told her I had been down there all morning or all day. And she asked me what I saw while I was down there and what my opinion was of the bombing. And I told her that I was highly upset because the news media and the information that they were given was not the accurate information that they were giving out to people.
In what way was it not accurate?
That there was more bodies than what they were saying on the news media and releasing at the time. And I told her that I was very distressed over that because I felt like the public has a right to know exactly what took place up there. And while I was talking to her, I asked her, I was asking her questions about if they can find out and if they can actually report the story the way the story needs to be reported. And while I was sitting there talking, well, prior to that, when we first got there, they told us that they were waiting for them to find some more bodies. And if they did, that they would bring them, if they were alive, they would bring them to the triage center. And that they had made a makeshift morgue. They had moved it from the church across the street that was also destroyed in the bombing to the building next to this building that they had set up the triage center. And while we were waiting for them to start bringing bodies in, my husband and I went for a walk. And when we got back, prior to us going for a walk, there was several doctors and nurses that had come in to work at the triage center as well. And they were all there trying to get the cot set up and get the IVs set up, and they were just hustling and bustling. Well, when we got back, and the news media had caught me coming into the building, that we were outside before we had entered the building, and that's when I was talking to her. Well, when I entered the building, I noticed that most of the doctors and nurses that were there were no longer there. And we hadn't been gone maybe 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah, it's walked a few blocks.
And
there's just a different atmosphere. There was nobody helping anyone. And before, there was people bringing food and medical supplies, everything in. And when we came back in, there was just a cold, callous atmosphere about,
What do you attribute that to, Earl?
Well, I found out later that the FBI had taken over. And while she was talking to the lady that being interviewed on the Trinity Broadcast Network, this gentleman walked up to me and said, do you know her? And I said, yes, she's my wife. He said, well, what's she doing? And I said, well, she's kind of upset because they're trying to keep the body count secret, I didn't really know why. But I think at the time they said they had 19 people known dead, and my wife and the other people had already tagged over 120 people. And they just kind of turned around and walked away from me then. And I found out later that they were FBI or ATF or whatever, and they had said a few words to her also.
Tony, what was your impression of the FBI, Secret Service, and ATF before and after the bombing?
I really had no dealings with them prior to the bombing. And actually, I haven't had any dealings with them, other than the day of the bombing. I had a friend that worked in the Secret Service Department that was killed in the building. And there was another friend of mine that was killed in the building. And, she was a wonderful person.
They told TBN to shut their cameras off, and these gentlemen were questioning me at the same time Tony was being interviewed. And I saw these two gentlemen walk up to her, and they'd been talking to the ones that were back with me. And he said, asked if I knew her. And I said, yes, she's my wife. And he said, well, what is she? And I said, well, she's been down here all day trying to get people out of this building and help people. And he turned around to his friend and said, well, we need to get her out of here. And that's when she came back and told me that they had told her that the FBI was taking over and all of us to get out, and told her to keep her mouth shut.
So if you had to sum up in just a few words, what was the overall attitude for either one of you? What was the overall attitude of the FBI and ATF?
Well, when they came over to me, he was very pompous and arrogant about asking me who I was.
He was downright rude.
What I was doing there, if I was a civilian, where I worked, what my name was, which I didn't feel like any of that had pertained to what was going on that day or what had happened that day. And he wanted to know just basically everything about me, I would assume. And since I didn't feel that was important, I just told him that I had been down here all day and did what needed to be done, that was needed to be necessarily done. And he said, well, we're down here now, and he said, we're taking over the building, and he said, it would be advisable and recommendable that you keep your mouth shut.
Okay, Earl, how about these 50 cars that you said, approximately 50 cars or so you had seen?
Well, this was after we had left and started walking around. We were kind of just getting out of the area, just chill and go smoke, take a break. And we've been walking down the side streets. I think it was about 6th Street we went up to, because they were on 5th in Oklahoma. And we just looked at the...
Alright, that's going to be part 1. Part 2 coming soon.